Today, you can expect us to share some general information regarding reentry. This presentation has been designed based on community engagement through thought exchange, through emails, submitted questions or concerns, and other items brought up from other online platforms like Facebook, etc. Among other things, we're going to be outlining two options moving forward for 2020. One of those options will be an all-online virtual learning program. The other will be an option that's committed to on-campus learning to the extent possible based upon our ability to meet public health guidance and an analysis of the data associated with COVID-19. A little bit of history. Just 1 month ago, on June 16th, we provided an update on what reentry for 2020 could potentially look like. We had just heard from Governor Newsom about AB 77 and from Marin County Public Health. AB 77 was great for school districts in so many ways, particularly financially. This bill saved us from having to make draconian cuts to our programs and services. But in order to receive that funding, we were required to do a number of things. One, we were required to maintain a 180-day school year. We were required to meet minimum numbers for the number of minutes in each school day. And we were required to provide on-campus learning if permitted by our local health agency. At about the same time, we got guidance from Marin County Public Health that we were able to provide on-campus learning with class sizes up to typical size. And this triggered our requirement to provide on-campus learning. During the board meeting, when we shared this new information, we shared what we could do within the rules and acknowledged that things were likely to change before we got to our final plan. At that time, COVID positive cases were just beginning the late June upswing. Since then, Governor Newsom has reduced the expectations for on-campus learning, giving us far greater flexibility regarding what our schooling options could look like. Also, since that time, the number of cases in our country, our state, and our county have increased dramatically. All of this needs to be taken into consideration as we determine our plans for moving forward. And that brings us to today. Today, we're going to be as specific with you as we can, knowing that the circumstances associated with COVID-19 are changing constantly. We will bring a recommendation with greater specificity to the Board of Trustees at a special board meeting on July 28th. This recommendation will be shared and discussed with teachers and our other labor partners in different venues in advance of our bringing it to the board. We've heard a lot from our community. We appreciate the perspectives shared, and we are committed to implementing plans to keep our students, staff, and families safe while maximizing learning for all students. I want to start by addressing a couple of things before we get too deeply into our presentation today. The first is the July 17th timeline for committing to the virtual or on-campus learning model. Many community members have asked us to push that date out as far as we can. But in order for us to staff and provide sufficient training to this important program and to balance staffing across the district, we do need to post these jobs internally by July 22nd so that we can recruit teachers for these important positions. Knowing this timeline, we can extend the deadline a little bit. So we're going to change that commitment deadline to July 20th at 5:00 p.m. Families choosing the virtual learning model by the July 20th deadline will have priority for enrollment in the program. Those choosing the virtual program after July 20th will be placed on a waiting list, and the NUSD team will do all that we can to get these families enrolled in the virtual learning program with the goal of making sure that each family gets their choice. Another thing that we've heard a lot about from the community is committing to the virtual learning program for the entire year. And there are many in the community that think that's too much to reasonably expect right now. And so with that in mind, we will be changing the commitment from a full year to the first semester. Somewhere near the beginning of December, we'll be providing families with an opportunity to change their program option. And you can expect more information on that timeline as we get closer to it. So with all of that, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Amy Carter, our Assistant Superintendent of Education Services, and she's going to take things from here. But before we do that, I am going to do some introductions. So you're going to see many folks in our presentation today. It's a break from the Chris Koska show. As mentioned, you're going to see Dr. Amy Carter, for our Assistant Superintendent of Education Services. You're going to see Angela Chrysler, our Director of Special Education. You're going to see Yancey Hawkins, our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services. Jennifer Larson, our Director of Student Success. And we have a special surprise guest here, who's, unfortunately, we don't have his picture because he's a good-looking guy. Jonathan Ferrer, our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. So with that, Dr. Carter, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Koska. It's exciting to be having this conversation with our community. I think before we get too far into this town hall, I really want to make it clear what this meeting is. Chris has laid some great foundation for that conversation, but really our goal here today is to provide our parents and our students with more context and more understanding and more insight into this decision that we've asked you to make between the Virtual Learning Academy and the flexible in-person model for 2020-21. I want to be clear about what this meeting is not. This meeting is not a political meeting. We're well aware of the national and state conversations that are taking place, but our concerns are solely related to the health and safety and well-being of our students and our staff. Additionally, this is not a labor meeting. While we certainly do negotiate working conditions with our labor partners, those conversations do not take place in a public forum. So I want to be clear that those two elements are not what this meeting is about. Our agenda today is to offer you some information, some historical background on the reentry planning that has been done up till now. We want to clarify for you what the choice is that we're asking you to make. We want to give you more information about what the flexible in-person schooling option looks like. And we want to give you more information about our Virtual Learning Academy. After that, we'll have a question and answer period where we're all situated in the Novato board meeting room right now. And those questions will be coming in and we'll transition to those at the end of the slide deck. When we first began our work to look at re-entry, we had some core guiding principles, and these will continue to guide us throughout this pandemic. The first is to always prioritize the health and safety of our staff and students, while making sure that they have access to the rich educational opportunity that Novato is known for. Our second goal was to offer options. We know that there are families that have differing needs. And so you're going to hear a little bit more about those options today. Our next goal was to create a safe on-campus experience. And this means complying with all the guidance from our Marin County Health Office. This incorporates things like hand sanitizer, contact tracing, a lot of the things we'll be talking about in later slides. And lastly, we want to make sure that our system can adjust our campus activities and resources to support both our students and staff and their well-being. Dr. Koska mentioned the June 23rd Assembly Bill 77. This bill encouraged districts to, as much to the greatest extent possible, to work towards returning students to in-person instruction. So this has been the mandate that we've been under, is trying to find ways that we can strive towards that in-person learning activity for our students. There were some qualifiers in that assembly bill that subsequently there have been releases around that information, clarifying that while there are these two circumstances, that it was not the assembly's intent to limit the decision-making of local school boards. And so it really has clarified that this is a local community's decision. However, they do want us to continue as a district to strive towards in-person instruction. In that same bill, there was language around the reduced school day. We know this can be stressful for students. We know we're probably looking at students in classrooms with masks and the fatigue of our own staff in this difficult time. And so this bill has mandated some adjustments in the instructional minutes, and those are lifted there. So we are planning for, even at the full maximum return, that would still be a minimal day for the 2021 school year. A few days later, we had Senate Bill 98 that is also important in our planning and our thinking. This was really setting the bar for what distance learning looks like. There were some conversations throughout California and our nation about the teacher-student engagement and how imperative that is. And so this is a bill from our Senate that's really looking to push academic systems into offering quality, intellectually challenging educational experience that is equivalent to the in-classroom instruction. In that, they do mandate that our educators engage in daily live interaction with our certificated employees and peers. And so all California school systems will be under this obligation. And they want to make sure that we're focused on our special population groups throughout. So Senate Bill 98 will really be driving a lot of our instructional work in the future. One element that was in this bill is that we as a district and LEA, we must maintain weekly engagement records for each of our pupils who participate in distant learning. And this verifies the pupils' daily participation and tracking of assignments. So you're going to see a lot more robust quality control measures, a lot more robust accountability measures as we go into the fall. And these will ensure that anything that we offer remote for the school year has these elements designed into it. Okay, so let's get started on the reentry plan, this amazing, extraordinary 80-page document that we worked so hard of in May that now has a lot of variables that are being thrown at it. We began that work May 25th. We opened up an invitation to any and all that wish to participate. A lot of my colleagues thought I was crazy doing that as they saw the numbers grow bigger and bigger. But we did end up with 150 dedicated stakeholders who signed up to do that work for us and offer their best thinking in the reentry document. We had section teams meeting. We had a written draft on the 11th, and we presented that to the board on June 16th. For those of you keeping track at home, if you go back to that board meeting, one of the first things that I let the board know is that it was guaranteed to change. And so here we are now a month later, and we know that perhaps things might need to change in that. There was only one revision that's taken place since we put it in front of the board, and that was a revision to the elementary school schedule. And that was because AB 77 came out, pushing us to do in person. At the same time, we had county health figures that let us know that maybe we could do larger groups. And so that's the only amendment that has taken place to that document to date. Who was in this team? Who was crazy enough to sign up for this work? Well, we had the 150 individuals. We had 45% of those were our classroom teachers that really gave us an insight into what their educational needs would be and what they're looking for in these reentry guidance plans. 23% parents, and it was really an extraordinary moment to see all these stakeholders together, lending their best thinking for how we can safely re-enter together. We also opened up a thought exchange about that same time while the reentry committee was working. The reentry committee had the opportunity to take a look at that. And our thought exchange, we received feedback from, again, a nice wide range of stakeholders, 39 students, 136 of our educators, and 2,000 parents weighed in. Overall, there were 96, almost 100,000 comments that received ratings. So we know that there was a lively conversation there, and it really has given us kind of an index for what we need to be pursuing as a district. So appreciate everyone that was a part of that. As we pulled our data from our thought exchange, we began to see that different stakeholder groups had different themes that were emerging in their comments and in their posts and in the elements that they were rating most high. You know, I think it's quite moving to me, and really weighs upon me that our students are asking us to consider their mental health in our reentry, and we circle back to that quite frequently in our discussions and plans. But you can see there's a lot of stakeholders. They all have sort of different priorities in reentry, and so the poor reentry team's task was to come up with a plan that somehow managed to meet all these diverse interests. When we pulled through the data of that thought exchange with almost 100,000 ratings, there were 4 elements that were by far and large the most top rated comments. And I've listed them for you here. You could see that they focused on the fact that kids need to be outside of their house, to be on campus, to move around with their friends. Kids need socialization in person, and nothing beats the interaction with our educators. Number 3 was asking us for consistent schedules. You know we need routines. Students need routines. Parents, staff needs routines. And the number 4 was the ability for parents who work to have somewhat predictable schedules for our kids at this challenging time. So those particular comments and needs rose to the top as the most important reflected in that survey. But as we looked deeper into the survey, we found that there was a portion of the comments that were lower rated, but we still felt like it was important to plan for. We saw comments from parents and our school board and those of us that are getting emails from our community. We're seeing that there is a faction of our community that really is not going to be comfortable returning to in-person school, and that this is simply a personal family stance that they have, and that they need something different from Novato Unified during this pandemic. So we sat down and tried to parse out this feedback. And at the time that our reentry committee met, we were estimating that it might be as high as 20% of families were not going to be open to sending their child to school at all during the pandemic. And so we really needed to parse that out. And we felt like there were really 2 groups of individuals. Group 1 are the individuals that are sending us emails saying, reopen yesterday, immediately, please reopen. And they have some great arguments for why that is what they need from us. And we have a second group of individuals who are saying distance learning is really the only thing that I'm going to be comfortable with. I might have medically fragile individuals in my home, or I may simply believe that no matter what county health order is issued, my child is not going to return to school until there's a vaccine. So I'm going to use this metaphor of cat people and dog people throughout, and I certainly don't mean to belittle the complexity and the weight of this decision. That's not my intent. I have both a cat and a dog at home. And so I love both, and I understand how difficult this is for parents, but I'm going to use that as a metaphor throughout to really sort of explain the binary element of the decision that we're asking of you. All right, so if you're one of those dog people, we're camping you in someone who needs a flexible in-person schooling. That means you want us to strive to get in-person learning in place for you or your child. And that as county health orders evolve and we comply with those, that you are going to be comfortable sending your child to school under these safe protocols that are issued by our health department. So that's, if you're in that camp right now, you can know that you can opt to select for in-person learning. That means we're going to be working on a plan for you to bring your student on campus. If, however, you're a cat person, that means you're someone that we consider part of our virtual learning academy. And this is for families and households who may have medically fragile individuals and don't want to run the risk of sending a child to school, given that, or the child, him or her, may have autoimmune issues. So you are someone who knows that for the 2021 school year, you're going to need the Virtual Learning Academy. And this is also for families, again, like I said, who even with the county health compliance orders are really going to make the choice to student educated at home. So that's the binary. That's what we're looking for. We're going to talk to you a little bit more about what each of these will look like, but I want to be really clear that that is the decision. If you're opting for in-person, we do not know right now what that will look like or how the reentry will occur, but you're telling us that you're willing to be a part of that reentry process. We've gotten a lot of replies. Most of we're over half at this point of individuals who have made this choice. We're looking at about 10% of our population is really looking to have their child educated virtually throughout the entire 2021 school year. And we're seeing about 90% that are telling us that they are comfortable with in-person, that they're seeking that from us and for us to continue to build that for their child. All right, why did we issue a deadline? It was so stressful, and we realized this, and our hearts go out to you. I have so many friends who are mothers and fathers, and they're grappling with this. So we understand it was a big ask to ask in the middle of the summer, but there's a reason for that. Dr. Koska kind of spoke about it. Is right now our entire staff is dedicated to in-person learning, and so they're preparing for coming back to in-person learning. But if we know that we're gonna have a group of students who are only gonna need remote for us, we need to know that so that we can post those opportunities for teachers to apply to transfer and every move creates 5 other issues, so that we can move those teachers who select to be a part of that team. And then there'll be subsequent fallout at that campus. If we're taking a 4th grade teacher from Loma Verde, there's going to be repercussions for the campus as they adjust. And so it's really important for us to wrap our minds around this right now. And it's so important for our teachers so that they'll have some kind of runway into what they can expect for the school year. So while we understand it's a heavy and hard challenge for many of our families to make, it's just imperative that we do this so that we can give our teachers the best runway possible into their school year. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the flexible in-person schooling. What is that? When I presented to the board our reentry plan on June 16th, this was my slide, and I talked to the board about how we need adaptable models. We need some kind of bell schedule, some kind of student learning schedule that can go up and down the spectrum. We could have periods where our county health is asking us to go remote for a few weeks. We may have a period where it's going to make more sense to have smaller cohorts, or we could be at the point of full return. And as I met with the reentry committee, there was a part of our conversations where we found some humor in the fact that we are planning for a future which we couldn't have insight into. And so the goal was really to kind of leave a time capsule there in June with our best thinking that we would reopen a month later once we looked at the infection rates and understood better what was happening in our community. So again, that was just a guidance document. It's adaptable, and I'll talk to you a little bit about more about that as I continue. But it has to have that flexibility. That's why we're calling it the flexible in-person schedule. All right, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Yancey Hawkins, who's going to give you a sense of what's going to be taking place on the school campuses for the in-person learning so that you have an understanding of what that might look like.
All right, thank you, Dr. Carter. So I'm going to be going over our illness prevention procedures and protocols, and I'm going to break it into a couple different areas. The first would be essential protective equipment, which we call EPE, and personal protective equipment, which we call PPE. I'll get a little bit into our daily cleaning and sanitizing procedures, and then I'll go over some other safety procedures, including social distancing, routing, and a few other items. Lastly, I'll get into the site-specific safety plans that will be available at each of our site. First, I want to note that these procedures are obviously for the hybrid and full return models of what Dr. Carter noted about moving up and down the schedule. For PPE and EPE, all classrooms will have sanitizer, and sanitizer will be available around campus and in the office. Masks will be available for all students and staff. That includes disposable and reusable masks. Face shields will be available. Clear face shields will be available for all staff. Thermometers will be available for all sites and departments, and gloves will be available. All of our essential protective equipment and personal protective equipment has been received by the district for the start of school and is available now, and we are getting all that ready to go out to our sites at this point. As we move into our daily cleaning and disinfecting, the daily cleaning and disinfecting will be in accordance with the Center for Disease Control, CDC, and the California Department of Education, CDE's regulation. All custodians, including our substitutes, will be receiving training before school as we go, and additional supplies have been purchased and will be continued to be purchased, including additional soap, paper towels, disinfectant that will be available at each site as we move forward into this. As we move on, there will be social distancing in classroom, offices, and other spaces. We are going in now to each and every one of our classrooms and offices and going to determine the allowable social distancing. We will also have clear barriers. You've seen like those plexiglass barriers where social distancing is not possible or interaction with the public is happening. Each campus, we are working with the principals and our guidance from public health to have individual campus routing plans. This will include what you would see as arrows and circles on the ground where you should be waiting. So each campus will have routing to ensure social distancing to the highest extent possible. There also at the beginning of the year will be student and staff training around all of our updated safety procedures as we move forward. We will have requirements for face coverings that are in accordance with the Department of Health regulations, and those face coverings will be available for all staff and all students for them. Dr. Carter talked a little bit about stable cohorts, but one of the important safety procedures is around stable cohorts, and that's one of the reasons we need the decision around which model that you will be choosing. There will be staff testing. I got tested this morning over at my local testing facility, so we're still working on what that will look like, but there will be staff testing in accordance with Department of Health regulations as we move into a hybrid situation or the full return model. We also will, we are putting in place tracing procedures, and a lot of this is around attendance, and a lot of this is about restrictions on campus visitors. So limiting campus visitors to the only to our essential staff and partners. As well, we will have modified individual schedules on their days to limit cohort interaction. And that could mean at a recess or a passing period or specifically at our lunch periods to limit that cohort interaction as we move forward. Very importantly, the last thing I want to focus on is that every school in NUSD will have a site-specific safety plan, which we are finalizing now. They will have, some of the things will be across the board at every one of our campus. Some of those things will be specific to elementary, middle, or high schools. And then obviously some of those things will be very specific to the individual campuses and their student population and needs. With that, I will give it back to Dr. Carter. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Hawkins. Appreciate that. I want to just note that these images are from our own Rancho Elementary, where they've been doing some summer school programs, and it's quite extraordinary to watch some of these safety precautions that Yancey talked about in place. Whoop. All right, so flexible in-person schooling, what is it? As I said before, this is schooling that is designed at some point to be in person. So it's designed to adapt to county health orders and to COVID-19 outbreaks. And it's all while striving all year long to work towards in-person. So if we hit bumps along the road, we're gonna roll with those. We'll adjust back and forth, but you're committed to be a part of that roller coaster. You're willing to do that to get your child that in-person, on-campus instruction throughout the 2021 school year. So we're looking to sort of cull out those parents who are saying, no matter what you do, no matter these precautions that Mr. Hawkins has gone over are nice, but they're not enough for me. I know I need to not be a participant in the return to school. So those are the individuals that we want to see in the Virtual Learning Academy. Our flexible in-person, you're in for the ride, and we're gonna be working all throughout the 2021 school year to bring your child to campus to be in the company of their beloved educator. So that is really the choice. We're looking for, in the adjustability, I want to talk a little bit about what can be adjusted. As I said before, in the design of this schedule, we built in dials. These dials are for us as a community to discuss and bring before our school board. And so let me go into a little bit more information about what these dials are. One of the first things that we can choose to control as a district is the percentage of any given class that may come to campus during the school day. So we could have a scenario where we have 75% of the class at home, and on Monday, 25% of the class come, on Tuesday, another 25% of the class come, and so forth. We can do that, or we can dial it up as things are looking good to 100% in class, and maybe only a kid who is sick or unwell being at home. So we have the ability to dial up those cohort groups and how we choose to use them. Another dial that we have is the flexibility to bring groups back to school in a staggered manner. So we could choose here on the left that the majority of our grades are at home doing remote, but we've prioritized maybe our little ones, our TKs, our kindergartners, maybe those grade 6 who are transitioning to middle school, our freshmen who are also in the part of a big transition to high school, students with disabilities or English language learners. We could choose to open our campuses for in-person instruction for these groups and sort of renorm that, and then gradually filter in some of these other remote grades until we have all of our students who are opting for the in-person schooling together on campus. So that's another dial that's really built into the adjustable schedule. A third dial is the calendar. So we can decide, at what point on the calendar, based on the infections rates, based on what we're seeing in the community, do we want to begin by remote instruction, where we have 0 time in person, but we have 4 hours remote instruction, keeping in mind that there are some legal requirements to what that will look like for quality and for engagement. And then as hopefully we see a decline in those infection rate, then we can start dialing that towards increasing in-person instruction for our students. So the calendar itself offers us an opportunity to adjust. And lastly, it was designed so that if and when there was an outbreak in the midst of in-person instruction, we can easily and quickly take that cohort where perhaps the infection maybe occurred due to contact tracing, and just immediately send those students home so that they can have their remote instruction during the quarantine period, and then return back when that period has passed. So there's a lot of flexible elements in this schedule that we've built, and we're going to be having conversations as a community over how and when we want to adjust that. Again, those adjustments will be for anyone who has opted to be an in-person student. If you are choosing the virtual academy, then those adjustments aren't necessary. You've already decided that you're going to do the school year at home. So one of the questions that we see repeatedly is really, what is this going to look like for our most vulnerable special education students? And so I'm going to turn it over to Director Chrysler to give us a nice overview.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. I just want to start by saying that it's really important to understand that our system is constantly evolving and improving our supports and interventions for students through our multi-tiered systems of support. And so when we talk about special education, we're really focusing on our students who qualify and meet the criteria for eligibility under the IDEA. And it's really important that we think about our students with disabilities as students first and students with disabilities second. And the approach that we're taking towards designing what school will look like for the reentry of our students really hinges on some of the variables that we just don't know yet. And you know, the most important thing is we still need to know what parents' intentions are for sending their children back to school, or if they're opting for remote learning, so that we are able to match up the availability of our highly qualified staff and service providers to be able to support those needs of our students in either arena. Some of the questions that have been coming forth, I just wanted to lift up and highlight in each of the areas, and I will come back after we hear more about the Virtual Learning Academy to share some of the nuances in terms of what students will be receiving if they opt to participate in that program. Part of the Senate Bill 98 requires us to look at embedding an emergency condition plan into each IEP, which we did start this process in the spring with many of our students, and there's still work to be done. So we're going to be looking at affirming the offer of FAPE that is in the current operational IEP, coordinating what those services look like in the in-person hybrid model, and then working with the IEP team and the family to design what that plan looks like in the context of a 4-hour hybrid day. The IEP team is the most important team that your child has in their educational process as they navigate the special ed side of our system. And we know that those relationships are critical to the IEP process. And everything that we are able to do within our control to maintain those consistent IEP teams at each school site, we will continue to do. But as always, you know, even under normal circumstances, in years under normal and typical conditions, there are some changes among service providers that can be expected. In terms of services, this is the part that is the most tricky and the most dependent upon our guidance from CDC and county mental health and county health. So if students are able to return and we are able to provide push in and pull out services, the schedule will be carefully tracked to ensure that the contacts between students and students, peer-to-peer, and students to adults are tracked carefully, and that the time between the groups, we are able to implement our safety protocols. If students are not able to leave their cohort for any reason, given the current guidelines at any given moment, pull-out services will not necessarily be able to be provided in terms of individual supports or group supports in person. And if adults are not able to push into those classrooms, the services will be delivered through teleplatforms. And of course, the cohort guidelines will continue to be updated, and we will continue to adapt and be flexible within those guidelines to be able to provide services to students. And then mainstreaming opportunities, depending on what that looks like in the IEP, those decisions will be coordinated through the IEP process. In terms of assessment, we had many assessments that were put on pause, many assessment requests that came in during the time where site-based instruction was suspended. So we are ensuring that we are able to continue and pick up where we left off in the different trajectories of those timelines. And we're also seeking out solutions to be able to conduct valid and reliable assessments through the teleplatforms if we need to revert and default to that system. Assessors who are trained to be able to assess online through remote platforms are in high demand. So it's going to require us training our staff up and actively seeking out assessors who are available to provide that service. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Carter.
Thank you so much. All right, so the reentry committee left us with some really important things that they wanted me to emphasize with the school board. You know, as I said, they did their best thinking possible. We looked at all the research. This 80-page document is really an extraordinary piece of work by those 150 volunteers and teachers who were such an important part of that. But that is existing, and now that we're looking at what's happening around us, we're applying the recommendations in there and going to be adapting it to our re-entry. A couple points that I want to make is that agility and flexibility are going to be key for all of us in the Novato community. We're going to really have to roll with whatever the future brings us and be adaptable. Another comment that the reentry committee made sure that we included in there is that we need to focus on minimizing those deep breathing activities. So we need to proceed very cautiously with things like PE and music. And there may be times when that's most suitable to be offered remotely for students, or find different ways to make sure that those particular activities are handled in a safe manner. And we are going to just encourage everyone to be a part of supporting the continual sanitation and safety of our schools. We're all going to have to be responsible to take care of one another as we reopen. Okay, so July 28th is when we're going to be bringing some recommendations to our school board and asking them to really be the ones that put their hands on these built-in dials and give us some guidance on cohort groups, give us some information on re-entry dates. Their decision is going to be based on county health, on data, on recommendations from leadership, on the thoughts of our teaching staff, our certificated staff, classified staff, parents, and students. So we're going to have this community conversation, and I imagine there'll be kind of a rolling community conversation throughout the 2021 school year as we adapt to what the future holds for all of us. All right, so there's our reentry timeline. We're going to be re-meeting with those who were involved in making recommendations for scheduling. We're going to touch base with them now that we know where we are falling here in the month of July. We're going to be having our union discussions with our labor partners. We're going to be gathering any additional data that the school board may have and making those recommendations to the board on the 28th. And as soon as we have those, we'll be pushing those out to all of our community for the in-person planning. Again, if you are a remote family, you've chosen the virtual academy, then these are matters, these dials are not relevant to you. Your entire year will take place online. Okay, so now what everyone has kind of been asking for is let's do a deeper dive into the virtual learning academy. So if you're a parent who's identified themselves as this second group, as a parent who really, because of your family situation or the health of your children, your family, will not under any circumstances, be comfortable letting your child be a part of our in-person efforts, then this is going to be your opportunity. And I'm going to turn some time over to Director Larson, who's going to be going over our plans for the virtual academy.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Good afternoon. And I'm excited to be here to introduce our Virtual Learning Academy. So as we mentioned earlier in the presentation, we know that there is a percentage of our families that are committed to an online experience for their students' learning over the next year. Regardless of the health recommendations or the timelines in which we are opening and turning those knobs. So for our flexible in face-to-face remote, environment, that they would prefer to focus on just a virtual experience. So in order to do that, we really wanted to create something that was robust, something that was consistent, and something that was in alignment with what we would expect on any one of our Novato campuses. In doing so, we have selected two co-principals. Miss Elizabeth Olinik and Miss Amanda Davis will be taking on that charge. They will be co-principals of both Olive Elementary School and of the Virtual Learning Academy. Many of you know Principal Olinik has been a veteran and highly skilled principal in our district for the past 7 years. Ms. Davis has been the coordinator of teaching and learning and really brings her expertise in technology integration district-wide in grades TK through 12. And we just believe that this is a strong team that is going to be able to provide for the individual needs of the students that are choosing a remote environment. So as you can see here, there is a mission statement that has been designed. Our mission is to provide students with high quality virtual learning experience that enables them to meet their educational potential. There's a belief in personalization, a belief that the experience needs to fit a variety of situations and timeframes, and we'll speak a little bit about that in future slides. And then reconfirming that community building and relationships are an essential part, even in a remote environment. And so there will be time spent building the community within the Virtual Learning Academy, but also ensuring that our students in the Virtual Academy have an opportunity to stay connected to their home schools. The curriculum instruction that will be offered in the remote environment will be robust and consistent. We will be able to offer all of the core courses that would be offered on a regular school campus remotely. And these will all be taught by our highly qualified and NUSD credentialed teachers. As Dr. Carter mentioned, and our Superintendent Koska, this is one of the #1 reasons why we need to know which families are committed to an online experience. In order for us to open up these positions and identify teachers within our system who are interested in being a part of this program and are available to help start designing what this looks like in our cohorts, we would need to have an idea of the number of students who are going to be served in this academy over the next year. As we put students together, we will be able to be flexible in having age-alike, but also proficiency-alike groups to ensure that we can provide opportunities for them to build relationships, but also so that they have an opportunity to, even remotely, they can work in collaborative groups. They can be in small groups, they can work on at-home projects where they are then having discussions with their peers, both by age-alike groups, but like I said, also based on interest and their proficiency levels. And finally, and specific to our high school students, I want to confirm that we absolutely will ensure that our students have access to all of the courses that are required for an NUSD graduation, but also for their UC and CSU requirements, also referred to as their A through G requirements. We will have opportunities for our students to take part in an AP classes, and those will be looked at as individual needs when we know which students will be a part of the program. So more specifically to our AP classes and our support classes. As possible, we will certainly be offering AP classes. The bulk of our AP classes that are offered on our current high school campuses are offered in the virtual platform Apex Learning. That is the primary platform that we use in our high schools currently. We do, however, have access to a number of other platforms. We also have access to dual enrollment in our local community colleges at College of Marin in partnership with Santa Rosa Junior College, both of which are happy to support and always a willing partner to make sure that we have opportunities available for our students. In addition, we have a number of supports that we offer for our students on campus, and we want to ensure that those are going to be maintained in this virtual world. Those students that we have on our campuses that are receiving English language development, GATE differentiation, math intervention, literacy intervention, will have that consistent modification and differentiation honored throughout the remote learning environment. A number of questions have come to our office around what would the schedule look like, and I apologize for the small font on this. In the document that Dr. Carter showed earlier, there is an area where it speaks to the 4 hours a day, and that is specific to the requirements for the hours of instruction that must be provided. That does not mean that they will be on a computer for 4 hours a day. I want to confirm that all of this scheduling will be customized to be appropriate for the age and proficiency level of the group. So each grade level and each cohort will have daily check-ins, but those daily check-ins could range in a number of different formats and time frames. They will include daily conferences with their teachers. These could be one-on-one with the student and their families. This could be in small groups, and this could also be whole class, large group conferences. These will be balanced out based on their attention spans and the ability for them to stay engaged and what's appropriate screen time for a student in that age range, with a lot of other types of instruction. They could include direct instruction, like I said, collaborative group learning activities where students are meeting to do work in a collaborative group, individual learning activities, hand-on learning activities, and independent practices that they would be doing at home, not in front of a screen. Again, wanting to get back to the idea of this campus life, that we don't want to lose track of the importance of having a community within this virtual academy and maintaining relationships at their home schools. Regular communication will be provided for all of the students, but also support for parents. We know that parents who are choosing this option will need support to make sure that it is working and it is meeting the needs of their students at home. You'll have regular communication both from your principals, but also from your teachers to ensure that that is happening and that the curriculum is meeting the needs of the students. There will be community building events. I've mentioned the groups. And then also any kind of personalized supports would be tied into those regular communications with your staff members supporting your school. A specific question that has come up that I want to make sure we address. If a student chooses the Virtual Learning Academy for the 2021 school year, they still remain a student at their home school. So their enrollment, their home school does not change, including if they are at that home school on an intra-district transfer right now. So if your student is at a location or a school site currently and they are there on a transfer, that transfer is always honored for the duration of the time they're at that school. So if they're in 3rd grade and they choose remote learning for 1 year, when they come back in 4th or 5th grade, they will be at the home school that they left before, even if that was a transfer school. Secondly, for our higher grades, please know that your transcripts will continue to reflect your home school. So if you're a Novato High School student and you choose Virtual Learning Academy for a year, your transcripts will continue to say Novato High School, as that is your home school, and we are simply providing your instruction through a virtual learning environment. The scheduling for the middle and high school schedules will mimic that of the flexible in-person. So our high schools will be on a 4x4 block similar to the others, which means they also have the opportunity to complete up to 8 classes throughout this school year, just like their peers would if they were on the in-person model. All right, last but not least, and Dr. Carter and Superintendent Koska spoke to this a great deal. We know that there is some anxiety around the limited time to make this choice. We've extended the deadline to July 20th. So please make sure that you have your option in by that time. I want to clarify one of the questions that came up from earlier in our conversation. All of the requests that are submitted by July 20th will be accommodated. The word prioritize was specific to ensure that everyone knows that if you put your request in, we will be able to accommodate that because we will have those numbers and be able to prepare for that. That is, again, the reason we need that staffing number. Anything that comes in after the 20th will be on a wait list, and we will be able to start accommodating those to the best of our ability as we are filling up the cohorts once we have our staffing established. The more information and the more responses we have prior to the 20th just gives us the most adequate opportunity to ensure that we have the staffing and the resources that we need in both environments to accommodate the requests of our students and families. Again, just to reiterate, at the end of the first semester in December, we will review where we are and all of these opportunities, and we will give our community an opportunity to make a change from one to the other as space permits.
All right, I'm just going to remind everybody, I'm not even going to pull Director Chrysler into this, but a student with an individualized education plan, those rights and the services that are theirs will continue with them if they join the virtual academy. And so this would not be our first recommendation. We really believe that being in person with our wonderful teachers is the best solution for students. But if a family makes this choice, we'll revisit the individualized education plan and adapt it to the virtual learning academy. Okay, so if you're a family and you're trying to make this decision with one another, some things that we think you should consider when you're choosing. First of all is the safety of immunocompromised individuals. If you have those in your household, if your student is one, if you're close to one, then by all means, we would absolutely support the decision to go to virtual academy. That's really what it's built for. Secondly is just reflecting around your household's ability to support the demands of the full-time remote learning. We all know from the spring that this was no small ask for families. And so, we'd encourage you to have that conversation with your household. The third is socialization needs of children. As educators, we're all extremely concerned about the lack of socialization that the pandemic has really inflicted on our children. And we all know how important that is developmentally. So if you're looking at the virtual academy, please make sure you're providing for your child to have those socialization opportunities with some safe peers. And lastly, keep in mind that those in-person participation programs like MSA and STEM, we just feel it's too great a burden to ask our educators to provide this in our virtual academy. And so those aren't elements that will be in the virtual academy. All right, so the choice is yours to make at this point. We hope we have given you a nice overview. You're a flexible in-person schooling family. If you feel at some point you want your child to be on campus, we're gonna be making adaptable decisions based on the headlines, based on the infections rates, based on county health. But you want, at some point, you want that child to be in front of their teacher and have that face-to-face experience. It'll take place with all the safeguards that Mr. Hawkins has reviewed for us, but you are signing up to be a part of that great reentry plan. If, however, you are a family that says, regardless of what the Novato Unified School District puts in place, regardless of the protocols, it's not going to happen for me, then the virtual academy is yours to commit to. We'll be providing for you throughout the year, and this will give us the opportunity to have our staff ready to serve you, and we'll be taking those individuals who need that opportunity and sort of providing for them, excusing them from the reentry conversation, which we will then have with those in the community who are open to returning to in-person. So that's the binary split there. Again, remember that everything we do will be under these clear guiding principles, keeping the safety of our staff and students foremost in our mind. And now with what little time is left, we're gonna go ahead and do some question and answering.
All right, so I think I'll take the lead here. Why don't we scroll up to the top of that question sheet there? Got a few questions. One of them, the big trend that keeps coming up is about remote learning. Again, I want to reiterate, as Dr. Carter just shared, we're asking families to pick a lane and choose to be part of the virtual academy, which will be a commitment for the first semester of the year. And then you'll have a chance to continue that through the second semester of the year, or to switch back to the flexible on-campus program. One of the questions is about, there are a lot of big districts across our state are making the determination to do distance learning. I want to be clear, those districts are choosing to start the year in distance learning. They are not saying that they're going to be doing distance learning all year. They're going to start the year in distance learning. They're going to be monitoring and seeing what's happening with the data. They're doing that for any number of different reasons. Some of them are because, like, for example, in Southern California, in Los Angeles, the testing rate for positive COVID tests right now is in excess of 10%. Here, it's about half of that right now. Same thing with San Diego County. While it's a little lower than LA, it is still high. But you're also hearing plenty of Northern California districts who are making the decision to start in virtual learning. There's a chance that could happen here. Somebody asked about that. We will be monitoring the guidance from Marin County Public Health. We expect within the next day or so that they're going to give us an update, and that update could put us in a situation where we started the year in virtual learning. But what I think Dr. Carter's made abundantly clear is that our goal for those who pick that flexible option, the goal is to safely get students on campus when the data and the guidance from Marin County Public Health allows us to. There was a question about the priority for families who committed before July 20th. And I think Director Larson touched on that. She mentioned that if you commit before July 20th, then you're going to be a part of our virtual learning academy. You can choose up until the end of summer to be in the virtual learning academy. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to commit to giving you a spot. We're going to do everything we can to give parents the choice that they choose, much like we have done with transfers into our district or from school to school. We do our best, and we will do our best in this case. But after July 20th, if you take that option after July 20th, we will not be able to guarantee that spot for you. There was a question about, does the district get more money for in-person versus remote? No, the district gets the same money for a student, whether we're educating them in person versus in remote. And I see Assistant Superintendent Hawkins, hopefully agreeing with me by shaking his head no, but if I'm wrong there, chime in there, Assistant Superintendent Hawkins. There's a question, I think we discussed this, but I'll reiterate. The question is, why are we as parents having to make a decision by July 20th if you're not meeting with the board until July 28th? The board is very much on board with this two pathway option. They have committed to that, to saying that there is going to be a virtual academy. They've actually committed staffing to that to make that happen in the form of our two co-principals. But as Dr. Carter shared, we're not going to be able to wait until after July 28th for you to make that commitment, because we need to know how many teachers we need to staff it, and that creates a lot of dominoes. So as we pull teachers from one school into the virtual learning academy, then we got to figure out how we staff that. And we're getting pretty close to the start of the school year, and we need to make sure that we're providing sufficient training to those teachers that are going to be teaching in a totally different way than they're used to be teaching. There was one other question about why does the person who chooses remote learning now have to have a different experience from the student who goes to school for 1 week and then has to go remote. The people who are choosing to be in the remote learning or the virtual learning academy, they're saying for the first semester of the year, at least, I'm gonna be in the virtual learning academy. The other folks are saying that I'm gonna be in the flexible in-person schooling academy, and there could be some bumps along the road, and it could be, you know, part-time on campus, all virtual, part-time on campus, and then working more towards full-time on campus. They are gonna have a very different experience. And so we encourage you to consider that when you make the choice that you wanna make. And when we say make the choice, we do not need to hear from families who want to be in the flexible in-person schooling academy, the flexible in-person schooling. That's sort of the default. If we don't hear from you that you're gonna be in the virtual learning academy, we're gonna make the assumption that you're gonna be in the flexible in-person schooling program. So I think that hit on the questions that we had that we're gonna be able to get to. We're a little bit over time, and I want to be mindful of people's time. So with that, I know that hey, unless that child's going to be coming to our school, we need to get them off our screen there, Mr. Hawkins, I tell you. So with that, I want to thank everybody for their participation in today's event, for submitting questions, for engaging with us, for helping to make our system better. We continue to have a lot of work to do. We continue to know that the situation around COVID-19 is evolving and will continue to evolve. Again, I want to reiterate what you've heard many, many times, is that our commitment is to make sure that we're doing the best we can to educate your children, bringing them to their best capacity, and doing that in a safe way that's safe for our students, for our staff, and for our families. And we look forward to continuing to partner with you through this important work. So with that, we will wrap it up. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.